Good morning. I'd like to talk to you today about some basic functions of sewer machines. I'd like to give you some ideas on how to be safe, maybe give you some reminders how to be safe, just kind of reacquaint you with these machines. What we're going to talk today is about the Trojan Stallion. This machine comes with 162 feet of cable, 4-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch. It comes with an assortment of blades that you'll be able to use to unstop the drains. One of the most important things in starting with your machines is finding a pair of gloves that you're comfortable with. You'll see a lot of guys use different gloves. I always recommend a pair of latex gloves and then a pair of gloves that you have kind of broke in. As you know, your hand is going to be kind of on the cable when you're running these machines. It's going to be resting on that cable, so you want a pair of gloves that feels comfortable to you. When that cable is down in the clean out and you have your hand kind of resting on it, you'll be able to feel when this cable hits the blockage. When this cable hits the blockage, that energy is going to travel back up through the cable, and what's going to happen is that cable is going to kind of bow up, and that's the moment you feel it that you're going to want to push this feed in neutral. What I'd like to talk to you a little bit about these feeds. There's a little bit more design in them than you think. Forward and reverse of the cable is always done right here at the feed. I see a lot of guys, they're running the machine in forward, they unstop the drain. What's the first thing they do when they're going to bring the cable out? Flip the machine in reverse. One of the problems with flipping the machine in reverse, what you do is you go against the natural windings of the cable and you begin to unwind the cable in the drum. So if you've ever had a cable that's come unwound in the drum, maybe somebody before you used it, or maybe somebody bumped the switch, what ended up happening was the machine was then flipped in reverse and the drum moved this way. One of the ways that you'll always know, whenever I go to start a machine, one of the first things I do is I bump it. I bump the machine just to make sure the drum's always in forward. I've seen these switches put in reverse and guys think the machine's in forward, but it's running backwards. The way you're always going to know if your machine is hit in reverse, you're going to have a tangled cable in the drum, and your drum's going to be moving this direction. Okay? There's a safety sticker on all drums that's going to give you the forward direction of the drum, and you always want the drum in the forward direction. The reason for it is it's going to keep your cable from tangling inside the drum, and we all know what a pain that can be. Second thing, whenever we go to start running a machine, the first thing I like to do, if my cleanout's right here, is I like to get my cable in there. I like to get my machine as close to the cleanout as possible for this reason. The more cable that's exposed in the open, the more there's a possibility that people can get hurt, and those are one of the things that we really want to avoid, especially when we've been using it for a while and we're comfortable with it. We're comfortable with the machine being a little further than most than it should be. So we want to keep those things at the forefront of our memory. These cables can be dangerous, and we want to go home with all of our fingers at the end of the day. The feed right here, you have two different speeds on the feed. A lot of guys don't realize this. When they come and they set this in the cleanout, what's the first thing they do? They torque down on that plunger, and what they do is they end up torquing down too much. And what you end up doing is you end up bending your bearings. You end up destroying your bearings, and what is meant to help you ends up being a curse, because you say, oh, my feed's not working right. Well, it's just that you have the cable smashed down and the bearings so tight. The first thing I like to do is I like to make a little contact with my cable. I kind of eyeball it, and when I feel that my bearings are starting to make a nice connection and I've got my cable in the cleanout, I'll kind of check my speed right here by just moving this forward. Moving this forward all the way and moving it to the halfway point, you're able to control the speed right here. All the way is a lot faster, halfway is a little bit slower. If I need a little bit more speed on my cable, I can bring it down a little bit. So by using these two, I'm able to really control the speed. If your machine is a year old or 2 years old, you may need to have your feed rebuilt. You may need just a set of bearings. You may want to just buy a rebuilt feed or a new feed. So if you feel that your feed isn't working, always check the bearings first. Usually there's going to be 1 or 2 bearings in there that's kind of taken a beating over time, and you may need to replace it. All of these machines are hand built, so all of these parts can be replaced. So if you have a machine that needs service, feel free to bring it by and let us take a look at it and see what we can do to help. The same thing works for the reverse. Whenever I'm done and the drain has unstopped, by putting the machine in reverse, I can control the reverse right here. There's quite a bit that I have. All the way down I would be full speed there, and I could bring it in the feed in just a little bit faster by increasing the time on the plunger. So when I'm running it and I'm down there, I'm able to control speed here and here, and those are some of the things you kind of want to reacquaint yourself with. If you're having to push this plunger down all the way, there may be a spring in here that needs to be replaced, and probably your bearings are going to need to be rebuilt. So looking into your rebuild feeds, you'll know. So just to kind of recap on that, always make sure your drum is spinning in the forward direction, and you have two different options to control your speed right here. The second thing we're going to kind of talk about is using the right feeds, using the right blades to stop the drains. I always like to send a spearhead down first. And what ends up happening is when this spearhead hits the blockage, it's going to poke a hole right there in the blockage. We're going to get the relief from the water. The water's going to flush and start to move it. What I like to do then is I call it chasing the stoppage. When I feel like I've poked a hole in that stoppage and I'm running it, I like to kind of chase it a little bit further. A lot of guys, they hit the stoppage, what do? They pull it out and put it in the truck, and they just walk away. I like to kind of make sure I chase that stoppage, make sure I chase that wad of trash, and after I'm done with that, I've brought my feed in. What I'll do is I'll take my spearhead off and I'll run a standard cutter blade, because I don't want to be called back out there in a week or two. If it's the winter time and I'm at a restaurant, I'll run a grease blade. We make 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch grease blades for different type applications. What I'll do then, I'll put my cable back in the clean out. I'll chase this all the way down, kind of chase it all the way down for a few minutes, just to really make sure I get that pipe clean and don't have to come back out there. Then once I'm done, I'll run my cable in reverse. I'll bring my cable all the way back in. I'll lock my cable down. I'll turn my switch off. One of the best advice that we can give people when running the machines is take your time. One of the other things that we see guys get in a lot of trouble with is pedal placement. A lot of times when they're running it, they'll be running it and they'll have all their weight on here. What happens when you get yourself in a bind is you can't get that foot up. And when you can't get that foot up, you can't get the machine to stop. And you hear stories about guys having to, reach over and turn because they were stuck. Maybe their knees got tight. So when you're running it, you always want to have your weight on the opposite foot of the pedal, because you want to be able to lift up. So when you have it and you're running down in this clean out like this, and your weight's down here, you want to have your lighter foot on the pedal. One of I've seen guys run it with their knees, and at that moment they can't get up, and it always just makes me a little nervous. The other option, I've seen guys run it under their arm so that they can release the pedal as well. So you want to find a safe way to be able to trigger the pedal if you find yourself in a tight spot. One of the best ways that might be is standing up and kind of running it, because you leave your option for this foot. So my weight is on this foot, my hand is down here, and the problem with it is you will tire your back out, so you might have to slow down and kind of stretch out a little bit. But it is a safer way, because I'm pushing down on the cable as the cable's in the clean out. My weight is on this foot, and I'm kind of in a 3-point stand, so my foot is able to really move that pedal. You want to be able to get off that pedal if you find yourself in a tight spot. We've seen a lot of injuries over the years on a lot of different style machines, and a lot of times it was guys just get careless. It's Friday night and they're ready to get home, it's raining, taking your time, kind of just remembering the basics, fellas, about using your cables and your feed. So just remember, your speeds are right here, your drum needs to be in forward, your foot needs to be light on the pedal, and a good pair of gloves, a good pair of latex gloves underneath to keep your hands clean, and then find yourself some nice riveted gloves, or use some of the PVC gloves. These gloves have crushed PVC. You can get about 6 months use out of these gloves right here. What'll happen where you kind of control the cable right there, they'll wear themselves thin, but for about $15, it's a really good investment. I like to keep both pairs on the truck. I find that sometimes these, if it's a grease line or something real heavy, I kind of like to use the heavier duty ones. If it's a light stoppage, soft stoppages, I'll kind of go with the lighter ones, just depending on how dirty the cable is. Kind of determines which ones I'll use. Using the right blades, cleaning it the first time with your spearhead, and then coming back with the cutter head. Taking your time while doing it are some of the things that are going to keep you from being hurt. The same applications apply to the smaller machine. On the smaller machines, I always like to use the lighter gloves. The lighter gloves, because the cable's a lot lighter and everything travels a little bit faster with these than the big ones. Once again, we always want to make sure that our drum is spinning forward. This cable, when you're running it and you have the same thing, you're going to want to choose which way works the best for you on the pedal. Remember that the forward is always you always want your drum in forward, so the switch should always be forward. Choosing the right cutter. The best way to run your sync machines, always run your small cutter blade down there first and poke a hole in that stoppage, get it to drain, but don't stop there. Once you bring it back, attach your drop head to it, and what's going to end up happening is that drop head's going to go through, and as it circles, it's going to really clean that pipe. Take your time in doing that. One of the other things you may want to do afterwards, especially if it is like a cafeteria style line, you may want to run a flush bag down there, just to kind of break up that grease or break up those chunks of waste that were down there, and kind of move some water through the line. It never hurts to run a flush bag after you run one of your machines, just to get some water flowing, and that way that nothing stops up later that day, because we've seen stuff like that. Keeping your machine in forward, having an idea where your pedal is. These lighter gloves, they work wonders on these machines right here, because they are waterproof. Sometimes you can run them without it. On the new one, they're a little bit newer, you can run them without the latex gloves. If you have any questions, feel free to call us over here at Trojan. If your machines are down and they need some service, feel free to bring them by. We'd love to work with you guys, and I hope today that you guys kind of have an idea of some safety steps that are reminders to keep you safe and get you home safely. Thank you, fellas. Hope you have a good day.